serious people who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? When I was around 4, I was molested by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she committed suicide. I keep trying to type something, but frick anything I type just doesn't feel right. I'm so freaking sorry, for you and your family. You were 4. Telling was the right thing for so many reasons. I'm glad you're okay. I've posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is, when I was 16 years old I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had a heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I'm very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. To hold a stranger's hand in his final moments. You are a beautiful person. I hope you are okay now. Thanks. I don't know about that. I was scared. I was trying to keep him awake until the paramedics got there. I didn't want to move him out of the car. I felt like we shouldn't move him in case he had trauma to the body, but bystanders insisted. He looked so lonely stretched out on the sidewalk, and I kept thinking about how his long life had led to this, a car wreck with a 16-year-old girl. I used to think about it a lot, that my voice was the last he heard, my hands were the last he felt, and if that even means anything. I don't know if he was even aware I was there. It's been a long time. I'm 37 now, but I think about him every January 2nd, which was the day of the accident. His family being so gracious and reaching out to me made a big difference in how I coped at the time. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to being sexually abused by her grandpa, and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the sexual abuse. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters/cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been molested too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking, and grandma messed with the dosage, which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. When I was younger playing Sparks whilst at my grandparents' house, I had left the room to go to the bathroom, leaving my wired controller on the floor. I suddenly hear a thud and decided to finish my business before seeing where it had came from. Whilst cleaning up I heard a scream from my grandma and was told to stay in the bathroom, and so I did. Found out that my grandfather had accidentally stood on my controller and fell over the wire, cracking his skull open on the table, and was announced dead at the scene when the ambulance arrived. I'm now extra cautious with where I leave items, encouraging my younger brother and sister to clear up their mess once they're done. As part of my job, I work with seniors to improve their reflexes and balance. These are things that degrade with age. In most demographics, falls kill more older adults than anything other than heart disease and cancer. People with good balance and quick reflexes rarely seriously injure themselves from a fall. Your grandfather in his younger years could have recovered from his misstep, or could have gotten his arms out in front of him in time. Frailty, decline, and bad luck killed your grandfather, not you. It could have been a crack in a sidewalk. It could have been a crack in a sidewalk. For anyone reading this isn't hyperbole. I recently started working for my county's public works department to maintain, among other things, the sidewalks. I had a project where I had to gather information about all of the outstanding work orders for sidewalk repair. While skimming through some of the work orders I noticed one has almost a dozen pictures attached. Curious, I click on them. The first few were normal pictures of the cracked sidewalk. The rest were of an elderly, 80+ woman getting put on a stretcher and loaded into an ambulance. The crack in the sidewalk wasn't anything most people would notice. When I was 18 I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores, etc. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's diseases and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle, and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. When I was 4 years old, my mother was roughly 3 to 4 months pregnant. One day I was supposedly crying and throwing a tantrum over a toy or something. My mother tried to comfort me by cradling me in her arms and take me to my room, which was up the stairs, but I cried and kicked so much that she lost her balance and fell down the stairs. I was unhurt and mother recovered without any lasting injuries, but my sibling died. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the street lights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between two crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him laying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911 but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with a strange device that I found out later was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up, and I finally saw my car with a flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked 3rd shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible, that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing, and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while, just so I don't forget what he looked like. Sorry if this comes through as rambling, but I've been actually explained this in writing before. My sister chose to end her own life by walking into traffic, and in some ways, I feel worse for the people that hit her. She made a horrifying choice that I still struggle to understand, but she made that choice. The people who hit her unfortunately didn't get to decide whether or not they wanted to be a part of her tragedy, and I feel terribly for them. I will never be able to apologize to or comfort those people, and I would really like to, so allow me to use this anonymous posting to kind of do so. The other person made the mistake, not you, and while I expect you'll be haunted by it, because it was horrifying, please understand that the family member's grief towards you is heartfelt, albeit may be undesired on your part. I'm not sure if this counts, but I wanna get it off my chest after reading these. My friend was a well-known and liked guy, very social, did drama, football, and baseball in high school. Some of the best moments of my life was with him. One day he just stopped coming around. He would read my messages but not reply. He ignored anyone else. It was so bizarre. One day, he came to my house, and it was like the good old days. He said he got into target shooting, but his gun blew up because he fired a bullet that had been in the washing machine. He had some powder burns on his hands. He asked to borrow one of my guns, and I said yes. 2 days later he shot himself with it. I've hated myself since. Most of our mutual friends hate me. His family hates me, and I was barred from his funeral. I feel so bad I didn't see the signs. I miss you, Tom. I wish I could have helped you, like you did me. Edit. To clarify, he borrowed my gun. Also, thank you all so much for your words of support. I wish people here could see things how you did. It's taken years, but I no longer blame myself for what happened. It still haunts me. He was being himself that day, laughing, joking, and making plans for us to hang out more. I'll let him borrow the gun without a second thought because I got lost in the moment. Plus, as soon as I said yes, he carried on like it was no big deal. We grew up with guns. A lot of people don't see that. Most never asked. To them, I'm the piece of shit who gave him the gun. Plus Tom was very popular person and I never was. So I guess it's easier for them to demonize me. It still hurts though. I wish I could have talked to him about how he was feeling. I wish he'd shown a sign of sadness, something to clue me in. Every day, I spend time playing the what if game. I get everyone who knew him lost someone special, but so did I, and it's like I'm not allowed to grieve for him publicly. Former paramedic here. We tend to have a fair share of what we ourselves consider deaths we are responsible for. You don't always interpret all situations right. There are days your hands are a tiny bit shaky and you miss that vein or trachea, etc. But I will always remember the first one, as a fresh paramedic. 65Y/old male with chest pain. Just had his birthday yesterday. Now presents with chest pain. For this we give nitroglycerin as a spray. Works well, but has a downside. It reacts massively and violently with Viagra, etc., which was a brand new drug on the market back then. I asked the patient if he took any medication. He says no. Now the seasoned paramedics already know where this is heading. I of course forgot to ask the wife to leave the room and ask again, because he visited a hooker for his birthday. He crashed half a minute after I gave him the nitroglycerin, and despite all efforts died on scene. Edit, as it is asked a lot. We found out about his secret birthday party via the police investigation. Every death that is non-expected in my country mandates a police investigation to rule out any wrongdoings. One of his friends told police the truth, and I'm fairly sure the family received the police report as well. Edit 2. Nowadays it is protocol for most services to explain to the patient that he will most likely die if the has taken any Viagra, etc. The consequences were known back then, 1999, merely months after it became available in my neck of the woods, as well, but we weren't as explicitly trained on it. It needed a few cases like the one above to change training and push that scenario into every healthcare professional's mind. 7 I sham on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath, and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. Deployed in Afghanistan. Urban area. I got into programming to kill the time. Had an Arduino set complete with everything I would need to make tons of little gadgets. Got pretty good at it too, going to school for it when I get out. When it came time to go home, I didn't have room to take the kit with me, so I threw it out. Keep in mind, locals work on this base, and in my time there, at least 3 had been kicked out for ties with the Taliban. Within an hour of tossing the kit, it had been taken. Didn't think anything of it. Probably some other soldier thought it was cool and took it. Big base, anything could happen. About 3 weeks after we left, an IED went off outside the gate. No NATO casualties, but about 20 civilians died in the blast. EOD reported that it was a strangely sophisticated bomb. They used my kit. My negligence gave them the means to kill 20 innocent people. I've never told anyone in the world about this, and it haunts me to this day. War survivor from Chechnya 94-96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17-year-old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, run out, the roof is gonna fall. And she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope, at least. Warning, this is a fricked up story, with only losers. I was 14 years old. It was a Sunday afternoon, somewhere in Europe. I was returning from a soccer match with my dad and 2 neighbors, friends of my dad. Going through my neighborhood, we met a new neighbor. They had moved in a few weeks earlier. He was returning from a hunting trip and was unloading a couple of rifles from his car. We said hello and chatted for a bit. Curious, 14-year-old me couldn't take my eyes off the rifles. I had never before seen anything like it up close. He noticed and asked if I wanted to hold it. Of course I wanted to. My father and one of the others asked something along the lines of it isn't loaded, I presume. The hunter said of course it isn't, and handed me the gun. The moment I took it, it went off, hitting his 7-year-old daughter, who came running from the backside of the house, more or less in the middle of the chest. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. She was their only child, and had celebrated her 7th birthday just days prior. The aftermath was a lot of police, investigations and a generally bad time. It felt like I fell down a dark, empty hole, and shut myself completely in. I don't remember much from the years that followed. I existed, but that was it. Legally, I was acquitted. Everyone agreed that the hunting neighbor had stated the gun wasn't loaded, and that he practically insisted on me holding it. The hunter himself got some kind of suspended jail sentence. The year since has been bad for most involved. The hunter was divorced from his wife shortly after. I heard he got some kind of depression and apparently has been in and out of a mental hospital. His wife is consumed by hatred and shows up to threaten me anytime she can find me. I have moved repeatedly and even changed my name, but she still finds me regularly. I have filed several court orders against her, and she is forbidden to come closer than a few kilometers from me, but that doesn't stop her. She has never hurt me physically, though, but she usually say that she'll kill me one day. My father took this very hard and was in dark place for years. He is now retired and spends most of his time doing various volunteer work for youth organizations and the like. I know it is way of doing some kind penance. My mother died a few years ago and was an amazing support for me. Even though we never discussed the incident or the dead girl, I was never able to get back into any kind of meaningful education, barely managing to finish my country's version of high school. I now live and work with my brother, and I'm doing kinda okay. I never speak to anyone about this, except my father. TL. Doctor, neighbor asked if I wanted to hold his rifle. It went off, killing his daughter. Edit. I didn't intend to ever access this account again, but just a few comments. Thanks for your sympathy, thoughts and warming words. I really means a lot. Regarding the trigger and why the gun went off, I honestly don't know. I probably put my finger on the trigger as I was handed the gun. Remember, I had never seen a live gun before. My only experience with guns was television. I haven't even been a gamer, ever, only a soccer game at a friend's house. I know the official report, which I probably have someplace, say something about the gun, the trigger and the probable reasons why it went off, but at the time I just blocked everything. I don't really feel like reading it anyway. It doesn't matter now, and will only bring me pain. The mother is arrested with regular and irregular intervals, and I know she was at least heavy fined some time ago. She is regarded as a low threat according to the police, no violent history ever, and I think she is considered mostly noise and no action. This kind of court orders is not very common in my country, and I think not very high priority with the police. To be frank, I'm not very afraid of this woman. She is mostly a very unpleasant reminder of my own guilt, and every time I see her I get a very negative reaction that can last for days or weeks. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content.